The lights on Galactic Council Station Omega-7 flickered as another emergency message arrived. Chancellor Vorthak's 6 arms moved across his control panel with growing panic. 3 of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations were about to destroy each other, and nothing could stop them. The Villani Empire controlled the Eastern Spiral arm. They were tall, pale beings with large heads who could read thoughts. For 200 years, they had kept peace through their telepathic abilities. But now they faced enemies they could not understand. The Kretch Collective swarmed across the northern sectors. Millions of insect-like creatures shared one giant mind. They worked together perfectly, building massive ships and mining entire planets. They saw other species as either useful or dangerous. The Thakari Republic dominated the core worlds. These proud warrior people lived by strict honor codes. They would rather die than show weakness. Their ships were works of art, beautiful and deadly. For 50 years, tensions had grown between these 3 powers. Trade disputes became border conflicts. Border conflicts became fleet movements. Now, massive armadas faced each other across 3-star systems. War was only days away. Chancellor Vorthak had tried everything. The best mediators in the galaxy had failed. The crystalline entities, known for their wisdom, had given up after one meeting. The Machine Collective, famous for logical solutions, had declared the situation impossible. Even the ancient Watchers had refused to get involved. "Sir," said his aide, a nervous Pluthari with shaking tentacles, "the human ship has arrived." Vorthak closed his eyes. Humans. The newest species to join galactic civilization. They had been traveling among the stars for only 200 years. Their technology was basic. Their ships were small and slow. They had no special powers, no advanced weapons, no great wisdom, but they had something else. Something that made even the most powerful aliens nervous. The human ship Soul's Promise was tiny compared to the massive alien vessels docked at the station. It looked like a metal box with engines attached. No one would call it beautiful or impressive. But as it docked, security alerts went out across the station. "All personnel remain calm," announced the station computer. "Human diplomatic team boarding at Dock 7. In the corridors, aliens stopped their conversations. The Villani touched their temples, trying to sense the human thoughts, but finding nothing clear. The few Kretch drones on the station moved in. Perfect formation. Their shared mind calculating unknown risks. Thakari honor guards checked their weapons, though they knew they would not need them. 4 humans walked through the airlock. They carried simple bags and wore plain gray uniforms. The leader was a woman with short black hair and calm eyes. She moved with quiet confidence, looking around the station with genuine interest. "I am Jiwon Park," she said to the greeting committee. "This is my team. Hyunwoo Kim, our cultural specialist, Minji Lee, our communications expert, and Taiho Choi, our security advisor." The aliens in the greeting party shifted uncomfortably. Hyunwoo was a tall man with glasses who carried several thick books. Minji was a young woman with bright eyes who smiled at everyone she met. Taiho was muscular and serious, but he walked like someone who preferred talking to fighting. They looked completely ordinary. This made the aliens more nervous, not less. "Welcome to Omega-7, said Ambassador Quix, a silver-skinned Altarian who specialized in first contact protocols. "We are grateful that Earth has sent representatives." Jiwon nodded politely. "We understand the situation is serious. When can we begin?" "The other parties are preparing," Quix said carefully. "Perhaps you would like to rest first? Review the files?" "We read the files during the journey," Hyunwoo said, adjusting his glasses. "Quite fascinating. 3 very different approaches to civilization, each with their own strengths." Minji stepped forward. "We would love to meet the negotiators from each side. Understanding how people communicate is always the first step." Taiho said nothing, but his eyes moved constantly, taking in security positions, exit routes, and the behavior of nearby aliens. His presence somehow made everyone feel safer and more worried at the same time. Ambassador Quix led them through the station corridors. Other aliens watched from doorways and observation decks. Word spread quickly through the station's communication networks. The humans are here. They look so normal. Why do I feel nervous? Remember what happened at the Zephyrian negotiations. In the diplomatic quarters, representatives from the 3 warring civilizations waited in separate rooms. Each had brought their best negotiators, their most experienced diplomats, their finest legal minds. They had prepared for months, gathering evidence, building arguments, planning strategies. Zethmore of the Vellani Empire sat in his climate-controlled chamber, the air thick with the pheromones that helped his telepathic abilities. He was old, by Vellani standards, his pale skin showing the dark patterns that marked a master mind reader. He had negotiated treaties with 17 different species. He had never failed to reach into an opponent's mind and find their breaking point. But humans were different. Their thoughts were chaotic, contradictory, impossible to read clearly. When he tried to probe human minds, he found layers upon layers of complexity. They seemed to think several different things at once, and somehow this made them stronger, not weaker. Cluster Prime 7 of the Kretsch Collective occupied a larger chamber where dozens of worker drones maintained perfect coordination. The Cluster Prime was not one individual, but a specialized collection of minds that spoke for millions. They had solved conflicts through pure logic and efficient resource allocation. Every problem had a mathematical solution, except humans seemed to ignore mathematics when it suited them. They made decisions based on feelings, traditions, and abstract concepts that served no obvious function. This should have made them weak and chaotic. Instead, it made them unpredictable and effective. Honor Guard Zalthan of the Thakari Republic stood alone in his chamber, wearing the ceremonial armor of his rank. Every piece had been earned through combat or achievement. The scars on his face told the story of dozens of battles fought with honor. He understood strength, courage, and the price of victory. But human strength was unlike anything in his experience. They were physically weak, yet they had conquered their own violent nature without losing their fighting spirit. They could be kind and ruthless at the same time. They honored their enemies while defeating them completely. As the human teams settled into their quarters, conversations took place across the station in a dozen different languages. The same questions were asked in Vellani thought speech, Kretsch data bursts, and Thakari battle cant. What makes them so dangerous? How do they always win? Why do their defeated enemies thank them? In their simple quarters, the human team unpacked their few belongings and prepared for the most important negotiation in galactic history. They showed no sign of the pressure they faced. They seemed genuinely excited about the challenge. Interesting species, Hyunwoo said, reading through cultural notes. Each one has evolved fascinating solutions to the problems of civilization. Their languages are beautiful, Minji added, listening to station communications through her translator. So much history in every word. Jawan looked out at the stars where 3 massive fleets waited for orders to attack. Tomorrow we find out if peace is possible. Taiho checked the security reports one more time. It's always possible, he said quietly. The question is whether they want it badly enough. Outside their window, alien ships moved through space like schools of deadly fish. War seemed inevitable, but the humans had arrived, and that changed everything. In the diplomatic quarters of Omega 7, 3 groups of aliens shared stories they wished they could forget. The memories were clear and disturbing. Each time humans had appeared at a negotiation, impossible things had happened. Zethmore of the Vellani Empire touched his temple and projected his memories into the shared space. The other telepaths in his delegation experienced his recollections as if they were their own. 50 years ago, The Zephyrian mining wars had torn apart an entire star system. Two massive corporations, Stellar Dynamics and Deep Void Industries, had been fighting over asteroid mining rights. Their private armies had destroyed space stations, killed thousands of workers, and turned profitable mines into graveyards. The war had lasted 3 years. Every attempt at peace had failed. The corporations hated each other with a passion that went beyond business. Their leaders would rather lose everything than let their enemies win. Then a human mediator named Sun-Ho Yoon had arrived on a small transport ship. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and calm eyes. He wore a simple suit and carried only a briefcase full of papers. The corporate leaders had agreed to meet with him only because their insurance companies threatened to cancel their policies if they refused. They expected to waste a few hours, listening to another outsider who did not understand their situation. Sun-Ho had begun by asking simple questions. How had the war started? What did each side really want? Why was this particular star system so important? The corporate leaders had answered impatiently, giving the same explanations they had repeated for years. Stellar Dynamics needed the rare metals for their expansion plans. Deep Void Industries had prior claims to the territory. The asteroids contained enough wealth to fund a dozen colony ships, but Sun-Ho had kept asking questions. Different questions, deeper questions. What will happen to your workers' families if this war continues? How many promising young engineers have you lost to combat duty? When did you last feel proud of your company's achievements rather than angry at your enemies? By the end of the first day, something strange had happened. The corporate leaders were talking to each other instead of at Sun-Ho. They were sharing stories about their company's histories, their dreams for the future, their fears about what the war was costing them. On the second day, Sun-Ho had presented them with a simple idea. Instead of fighting over the asteroids, why not work together to mine them? Each company had different strengths. Stellar Dynamics had better ships. Deep Void Industries had superior mining equipment. Combined, they could extract 10 times more wealth than either could alone. The corporate leaders had rejected the idea immediately. They were enemies. Their shareholders would never accept partnership with their rivals. But Sun-Ho had asked more questions. What did their shareholders really want? Profits or warfare? What did their workers really need? Jobs or glory? What would their children remember them for? Building something great or destroying something beautiful? On the third day, the corporate leaders had announced their merger. Not a treaty or a truce, but a complete joining of their companies. They had embraced each other in front of the cameras and declared their eternal friendship. The watching galaxy had been stunned. No one could explain how one human had achieved what armies and diplomats had failed to accomplish. The corporate leaders themselves seemed surprised by their own decision, but they never regretted it. The merged company, Zephyrian United, had become the most successful mining operation in that sector. Their workers were the happiest and best paid in the industry. Their stock prices had soared. Their former enemies had become their closest collaborators. Zethmore's memory sharing ended, leaving his delegation in uncomfortable silence. They had studied those 3 days for decades, trying to understand what had happened. Their best telepaths had examined every recorded word, every gesture, every moment of the negotiation. They had found no evidence of mental manipulation, no hidden technology, no secret techniques. Sun-Ho Yoon had simply talked to people and asked questions. Somehow that had been enough. Cluster Prime 7 began transmitting its own memories through the Kretsch communication network. The data flowed instantly to every drone in the delegation, creating a shared experience of perfect clarity. 30 years ago, the Borderlands crisis had threatened to tear apart the northern galaxy. The Villani Empire and the Kretsch Collective had been locked in a territorial dispute over a chain of habitable worlds. Both sides had valid claims. Both had invested heavily in colonization. Neither would back down. The Villani saw the worlds as perfect for their agricultural needs. The planets had the right atmospheric composition for their crops, and the proper magnetic fields for their telepathic networks. They had already established 3 settlements, and were planning 6 more. The Kretch viewed the worlds as essential for their expansion. The planets contained the rare minerals they needed for their technology and had plenty of space for their growing population. They had built mining operations and hive cities on 2 worlds, and were preparing to claim the rest. For 5 years, both sides had built up their military forces. Villani thought ships had faced off against Kretch swarm fleets across the neutral zone. Border skirmishes had escalated into full battles. Diplomatic protests had become threats of war. Then a human negotiation team led by Heun-jung had arrived in the disputed territory. She was a small woman with bright eyes and an infectious smile. Her team consisted of experts in agriculture, mining, ecology, and social psychology. The humans had done something unprecedented. Instead of trying to divide the disputed worlds between the 2 sides, they had suggested that both sides were thinking too small. Why fight over 9 planets when you could cooperate to develop 90? Hyun had presented detailed plans showing how Villani agricultural techniques could be combined with Kretch mining technology to transform barren worlds into garden paradises. The Villani could grow food in places that had never seen life. The Kretch could extract resources without damaging the ecosystem. But the breakthrough had come when the humans had arranged for Villani farmers to work alongside Kretch miners on a test project. The 2 species had discovered that their abilities complemented each other perfectly. Villani telepathy could guide Kretch excavation with incredible precision. Kretch efficiency could support Villani agriculture on a massive scale. Within 1 year, the former enemies had established joint colonies throughout the borderlands. Their combined technology had created the most successful settlements in that sector. Trade between the Villani and Kretch had increased by 3,000%. The most disturbing part was how natural it had all seemed. Both sides had wanted the cooperation from the moment they understood it was possible. The humans had not forced them to work together. They had simply shown them how to do what they already wanted to do. Honor Guard Zalthan shared his memories through the Thakari military communication network. His fellow warriors listened with growing unease as he recounted the Syndicate Wars. 20 years ago, the Outer Rim had been controlled by criminal organizations. 7 different syndicates had carved up the territory into warring kingdoms. They smuggled weapons, enslaved entire populations, and fought brutal wars for control of trade routes. The syndicates were not ordinary criminals. They were organized armies led by brilliant strategists and ruthless killers. They had codes of honor as strict as any military force and loyalty as strong as any government. They preferred death to surrender and saw compromise as weakness. For a decade, they had fought each other across hundreds of star systems. Their wars had killed millions of civilians and destroyed countless worlds. No government had been strong enough to stop them. No military force had been large enough to defeat them all. Then humans, Youngmin Han and Sora Kang, had arrived in the Outer Rim aboard a single small ship. Youngmin was a former soldier, with scars on his hands and sadness in his eyes. Sora was a trader who knew every smuggling route and every black market deal in the sector. The humans had not tried to fight the syndicates or arrest their leaders. Instead, they had offered them something better than crime, legitimate business opportunities that were more profitable than theft. Youngmin had shown the syndicate leaders how their organizational skills could be used to run legal corporations. Their loyalty networks could become employee relations. Their territory knowledge could become market expertise. Their military discipline could become operational efficiency. Sora had introduced them to legitimate traders who needed the exact services the syndicates already provided: protection, transportation, negotiation, and enforcement. The only difference was that legal businesses paid better and lasted longer than criminal enterprises. The transformation had taken 6 months. One by one, the syndicate leaders had declared their organizations legitimate. They had registered as corporations, paid taxes, and established trade agreements with galactic governments. The former criminals had become the most effective police force in the Outer Rim. They knew every trick, every hiding place, every method used by those who still chose crime. Their conversion rate was extraordinary. Most criminals preferred to join the new legal syndicates rather than fight them. The Outer Rim had become the safest and most prosperous region in that sector. The former syndicate leaders were now respected business. In their modest quarters aboard Omega-7, the human team spread their research materials across a simple metal table. Books, data tablets, and printed reports covered every surface. The 4 humans worked quietly, each focused on their specialty, while hidden sensors throughout the station recorded their every word. Ji-Won Park studied psychological profiles of the 3 alien species. Her military background had taught her to understand enemies before fighting them. Now she used those same skills to understand allies before helping them. She made notes on paper with an old-fashioned pen, a habit that confused alien observers who expected advanced technology. "The Villani are fascinating," she said to her team. "They evolved telepathy because their homeworld had predators that could sense fear. The only way to survive was to share thoughts instantly across the group, but that means they never learned to lie or hide their intentions." Hyun-Woo Kim looked up from his thick books about alien cultures. "That explains their confusion about the Kretch. The Villani assume all conflict comes from misunderstanding because telepathy eliminates most misunderstandings. They cannot imagine creatures who understand each other perfectly but still choose to fight." Minji Lee was listening to recordings of alien languages through her headphones. She could speak 17 different galactic languages fluently and understand dozens more. Her gift was not just translation, but understanding how different species thought through their words. "The Villani language has 47 different words for sharing thoughts," she said. "But they have no word that means the same thing as our word privacy. The closest translation means mental illness or broken connection." Taiho Choi read security reports while cleaning a weapon that he probably would never need to use. His presence alone made most aliens nervous, though he had never threatened anyone. His real job was to understand how each species reacted to stress and danger. "Villani military doctrine is based on overwhelming telepathic coordination," he said. "They can move thousands of ships as if they were one organism, but if you disrupt their mental links, they become helpless. They have no experience fighting as individuals." The team turned their attention to the Kretch Collective. Hyun-Woo opened another book, this one filled with mathematical equations and hive structure diagrams. "The Kretch evolved from insects that faced extinction from climate change," he explained. "Only the colonies that shared resources perfectly survived. Over millions of years, they became a single organism, spread across multiple bodies." Ji-Won studied tactical reports from Kretch military operations. "They think like a computer network. Every decision is calculated for maximum efficiency. They do not understand waste, emotion, or individual preference. To them, the Thakari honor codes are simply programming errors." Minji played a recording of Kretch communication. It sounded like static to human ears, but computer analysis revealed incredible complexity. "They do not have individual names because they do not think of themselves as individuals. The closest thing to I in their language translates as this, processing node or current speaker function." Taiho reviewed Kretch battle tactics. "They fight like a swarm intelligence, perfect coordination, no wasted motion, absolute logical decision-making. But they cannot adapt quickly to unexpected situations because every change must be calculated and approved by the entire collective." The I. Team's analysis of the Thakari Republic required different books and different approaches. The Thakari were warriors, but their culture was more complex than most outsiders realized. The Thakari homeworld had no major predators and no environmental disasters. Hyunwoo explained. They had to create their own challenges to grow stronger. Their entire civilization is built around the concept of worthy struggle. Jiwon examined Thakari military history. They do not fight to destroy enemies. They fight to prove their worth. The greatest honor is to face a strong opponent and either win through skill or lose through courage. They literally cannot understand fighting weak enemies or using overwhelming force. Minji studied recordings of Thakari poetry and songs. Their language has hundreds of words for different types of honor, courage, and noble defeat. But they have no good words for concepts like compromise or mutual benefit. The closest translations mean shared weakness or incomplete victory. Taiho analyzed Thakari warrior codes. They would rather die than be dishonored, but their definition of honor is flexible. A warrior who dies protecting civilians is honored. A warrior who lives by avoiding necessary battles is shamed. The key is understanding what they consider necessary. As the humans worked, alien observers in the station's security center watched through hidden cameras. Representatives from all three species monitored the human team, hoping to understand their methods. The Villani observers tried to read human thoughts, but found only chaos. Human minds seemed to think about multiple things simultaneously. They would analyze military tactics while remembering childhood stories and planning dinner menus. This mental noise made telepathic reading nearly impossible. How do they think so chaotically yet reach logical conclusions? Asked Zethmore, studying the sensor readings. The Kretch observers analyzed human behavior patterns through mathematical models. They calculated efficiency ratings, resource allocation strategies, and decision-making processes. The results made no sense by Kretch standards. They waste significant time on activities that serve no logical purpose, reported Cluster Prime. 7. They pause work to share humorous stories. They make decisions based on intuition rather than data. Yet their success rate exceeds optimal mathematical models. The Thakari observers evaluated human combat readiness and threat assessment. They were surprised by what they found. The security specialist maintains weapons he does not expect to use, noted Honor Guard Zalthan. The negotiator studies battle tactics she hopes to avoid. They prepare for war while working for peace. This paradox should create weakness, but instead creates strength. Back in their quarters, the human team began to see the complete picture. Each alien species was trapped by their own greatest strength. The Villani were so good at sharing thoughts that they could not understand creatures who chose not to share. When they encountered the Kretch hive mind, they assumed it was a superior form of telepathy. When they met individual Thakari warriors, they saw broken, disconnected minds. The Kretch were so efficient at collective decision-making that they could not comprehend individual choice. They viewed Villani telepathy as a useful tool for coordination. They saw Thakari honor codes as programming errors that prevented optimal resource allocation. The Thakari were so focused on worthy struggle that they could not recognize cooperation as a form of strength. They respected Kretch military coordination, but considered their lack of individual honor to be weakness. They admired Villani mental abilities, but saw their avoidance of direct confrontation as cowardice. Each species sees the others through the lens of their own evolution, Jiwon concluded. They cannot imagine different forms of intelligence being equally valid. Hyunwoo nodded. The Villani think the Kretch are telepaths without empathy. The Kretch think the Thakari are individuals without logic. The Thakari think the Villani are warriors without courage. Minji looked at her translation notes. Their languages do not have words for concepts the other species take for granted. How can you negotiate about ideas that do not exist in your vocabulary? Taeho studied the tactical situation. Each species' greatest military strength becomes their greatest weakness in negotiations. The Villani cannot hide their true intentions. The Kretch cannot make quick individual decisions. The Thakari cannot accept anything that looks like surrender. The humans spent hours discussing possible approaches. They considered traditional negotiation techniques, cultural exchange programs, and gradual trust-building exercises. None of these methods addressed the fundamental problem. We are not dealing with a disagreement about facts, Jiwon realized. We are dealing with three different ways of thinking about reality itself. The breakthrough came when Minji made a simple observation. What if we do not try to make them understand each other? What if we help them understand themselves? The team looked at her with growing excitement. Each species is trying to force the others to be like them, she continued. But what if they could be more like themselves? What if cooperation made them stronger in their own ways rather than weaker? Hyun-woo opened his books again with new purpose. The Vellani could use their telepathy more effectively if they understood non-telepathic minds. The Kretch could optimize their collective intelligence if they incorporated individual insights. The Thakari could find greater honor in protecting others than in defeating enemies. Taiho smiled, a rare expression that made his scarred face look almost gentle. We do not need to change them. We need to help them evolve. As the human team finalized their approach, alien observers throughout the station felt a familiar unease. The humans were not planning to trick their enemies or force them to surrender. They were planning something far more dangerous. They were planning to help each species become the best possible version of themselves. And somehow the aliens knew that would make peace inevitable. The main negotiation chamber of Omega-7 was a masterpiece of diplomatic engineering. The circular room had 3 sections, each designed for a different species. The Vellani area had soft lighting and air that carried the pheromones they needed for telepathic focus. The Kretch section had bright lights and air recycling that supported their complex breathing requirements. The Thakari space had traditional honor banners and temperature controls that matched their homeworld climate. In the center was a simple table with 4 chairs for the human team. Jiwon Park entered the chamber first, followed by her 3 teammates. They wore the same gray uniforms as before, but now each carried a small device that projected holographic displays. The aliens had expected advanced technology, weapons, or at least impressive ceremonial robes. Instead, the humans looked like office workers preparing for a business meeting. Zethmore led the Vellani delegation into their section. His pale skin showed the dark patterns of deep concentration, and his large eyes reflected the soft lighting. Behind him came 3 other telepaths, their minds linked in perfect harmony. They could share thoughts instantly and react to mental pressure as one organism. Cluster Prime 7 entered with a dozen Kretch drones arranged in precise formation. The insect-like creatures moved with mechanical precision, each one a part of the larger collective intelligence. Their chittering communication sounded like computer data transfers to human ears. Honor Guard Zolthan strode into the chamber wearing full ceremonial armor. Each piece told the story of battles won and challenges overcome. His honor guard followed in perfect military formation, their weapons secured but ready. They stood like statues of ancient warriors come to life. The 3 delegations took their places and waited. Standard diplomatic protocol required formal statements of position, legal arguments, and detailed presentations of grievances. Each side had prepared for days of complex negotiations involving trade agreements, territory disputes, and military limitations. Instead, Jiwon Park stood up and said something that surprised everyone. "You are all correct." The chamber fell silent. In the history of galactic diplomacy, no mediator had ever begun negotiations by agreeing with all sides simultaneously. Jiwon activated her holographic display, showing star charts of the disputed territories. The Vellani Empire has legitimate claims to the eastern systems. Your agricultural colonies were established first, and your people have invested their lives in developing those worlds. The Vellani delegation exchanged confused telepathic messages. They had expected to spend hours proving their claims were valid. The Kretch Collective has equal legitimacy in the northern sectors, Jiwon continued. Your resource extraction operations, are essential for your survival, and your efficiency improvements have benefited the entire galactic economy. The Kretch drones calculated rapidly, trying to determine if this was a negotiation tactic or a genuine assessment. The Thakari Republic's territorial integrity in the core worlds is beyond question, Jiwon concluded. Your strategic positions were earned through honorable conquest, and your military strength maintains stability throughout the region. Honor Guard Zalthan frowned behind his helmet. No outsider had ever acknowledged Thakari territorial rights so completely. Hyunwoo Kim stood up and activated his own display, showing historical timelines for each species. The interesting question is not who is right, but how three correct positions became incompatible. He pointed to specific dates on the timeline. 50 years ago, Vallani expansion moved toward Kretch territory because your agricultural experts identified planets with perfect growing conditions. You were not trying to threaten the Kretch. You were trying to feed your growing population. The Vallani delegation nodded. Finally, someone understood their perspective. At the same time, Hyunwoo continued, Kretch mining operations expanded toward Vallani space because your geological surveys found rare elements essential for your technology. You were not trying to invade Vallani territory. You were trying to ensure your collective survival. The Kretch drones chittered agreement. Their expansion had been based on logical necessity, not aggression. Meanwhile, Thakari military forces moved to defend their borders because your sensors detected increased activity from both directions. You were not planning attacks. You were fulfilling your honorable duty to protect your people. Zalthan straightened in his armor. The humans understood the warrior's burden. Minji Lee activated the third display, showing linguistic analysis of diplomatic communications. The problem is not your actions. The problem is your assumptions about each other's motivations. She showed examples of mistranslated messages. When the Vallani transmitted, "We seek harmony through shared growth," the Kretch computers translated this as, "We demand submission through resource control." The Thakari translation was, "We threaten expansion through territorial conquest." The three delegations stirred uncomfortably. They had never considered translation errors as a source of conflict. When the Kretch sent the message, "Collective efficiency requires resource optimization," the Vallani telepaths interpreted this as, "Hive mind demands total mental control." The Thakari heard, "Insect swarm threatens honorable combat." The mathematical precision of the problem became clear. Each species had acted logically based on incorrect information. When the Thakari announced, "Honor demands protection of sovereign territory," the Vallani saw, "Violent minds refuse peaceful cooperation." The Kretch calculated, "Inefficient individuals prevent optimal solutions." Taeho Choi stood up and activated the final display, showing military positions around the disputed systems. "You are not enemies. You are allies who do not recognize each other." He pointed to Vallani fleet positions. "Your agricultural ships are positioned to provide food supplies for long-term colonization. But from a military perspective, they look like invasion support vessels." The Vallani had never considered how their peaceful supply ships might appear threatening to others. "Your mining platforms are designed for maximum resource extraction efficiency," Taeho continued, indicating Kretch positions. "But they're industrial. Capacity could be converted to military production, which looks like preparation for war." The Kretch Collective calculated the mathematical accuracy of this assessment. "Your defensive formations are perfectly positioned to protect your core territories," Taeho concluded, showing Thakari deployments. "But they also create the ideal staging areas for offensive operations, which appears aggressive to your neighbors." Honor Guard. Zalthan realized that perfect defense could look like perfect preparation for attack. The chamber fell silent as each delegation processed this information. For the first time, they saw the conflict from their enemies' perspectives. Their own. Logical actions had appeared threatening when viewed through different assumptions. Jiwon stood up again. The question is not how to stop this war. The question is how to prevent the next misunderstanding. She walked to the center of the chamber, addressing all three delegations equally. You have three choices. You can fight a war that none of you actually want, based on misunderstandings that none of you intended. You can negotiate a temporary peace that will collapse when the next translation error occurs. Or you can solve the real problem. Zethmore spoke for the Villani delegation. What do you consider the real problem? You do not understand each other because you have never tried to understand each other, Hyunwoo answered. You have studied each other as enemies when you should have studied each other as potential allies. Cluster Prime 7's drones chittered rapidly before the collective spoke. Define potential allies. Our analysis indicates incompatible resource, requirements, and territorial claims. Your analysis is based on the assumption that cooperation means one side wins and the other side loses, Minji replied. But what if cooperation meant all sides could win more than they could alone? Honor Guard Zalthan's voice rumbled through his helmet speakers. Explain this possibility. Honor requires victory, not compromise. What if victory meant achieving your goals rather than defeating your enemies? Taiho asked. What if the greatest honor came from protecting others rather than conquering territories? The humans had presented the three delegations with a completely different way of thinking about their situation. Instead of competing for limited resources, they could cooperate to create unlimited possibilities. But the aliens were not convinced yet. They needed to understand how cooperation could make them stronger rather than weaker. The first day of negotiations ended with no agreements signed, no territory exchanged, and no military commitments made. Traditional diplomats would have considered this a failure. Instead, something unprecedented had happened. Three species that had prepared for war were now questioning whether war was necessary, and the humans had only begun to work. Private meeting rooms throughout Omega 7 hosted quiet conversations that would reshape galactic civilization. The human team had requested individual sessions with each delegation, claiming they needed to understand specific cultural concerns. What they actually did was far more sophisticated. Jiwon Park sat across from Honor Guard Zalthan in a chamber decorated with Thakari battle standards. The warrior had removed his helmet, revealing a scarred face that told stories of countless, honorable confrontations. His dark eyes held the confidence of someone who had never been defeated in fair combat. Your reputation puzzles me, Zalthan said, his voice carrying the formal cadence of military tradition. Humans are said to be skilled negotiators, yet you have no telepathic abilities, no collective intelligence, no warrior traditions that compare to ours. Jiwon smiled. That is exactly why we can help. We understand what it means to be alone, in your thoughts, to make individual decisions, to face challenges that test personal courage. She activated a small holographic display showing scenes from human military history. We fought wars for thousands of years before we learned to make peace. Every form of conflict you can imagine, we have experienced. Zalthan leaned forward, interested despite himself. The images showed human warriors in different eras, using different weapons, but all displaying the same core values he recognized. Your species understands honor, he observed. We understand many different kinds of honor, Jiwon replied. The honor of dying for your beliefs, the honor of living for your principles, the honor of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. She changed the display to show human peacekeepers, disaster relief workers, and diplomats. We learned that the greatest warriors are those who choose when not to fight. Zalthan's training had taught him to recognize weakness disguised as strength. But these humans showed strength disguised as peace. Explain this paradox. A warrior who fights every battle becomes a weapon, Jiwon said. A warrior who fights only necessary battles becomes a guardian. The strongest warriors are those who can end conflicts before they begin. She showed him recordings of human military philosophers discussing strategy and ethics. We call it victory through strength. The supreme excellence is to subdue the enemy without fighting, not because you are weak, but because you are so strong that fighting becomes unnecessary. Zoltan considered this concept. His culture honored courage in battle, but it also honored wisdom in leadership. You suggest that avoiding unnecessary war demonstrates greater strength than winning unnecessary battles. Your people have never faced an existential threat that required compromise to survive, Jiwan observed. Every challenge in Thakari history could be overcome through greater strength or greater courage, but some problems cannot be solved by fighting. She showed him scenarios that human military strategists called no-win situations, conflicts where all possible victories led to greater losses, enemies who became stronger when attacked, battles that could only be won by not fighting them. The Villani and Kretch are not your enemies, Jiwan continued. They are challenges that require different forms of strength. The honor is not in defeating them, but in protecting the galaxy from unnecessary destruction. Zoltan studied the human data with growing understanding. You propose that restraint is a form of power. The greatest honor comes from using your strength to protect rather than to conquer, Jiwan concluded. Your warriors could become the guardians of galactic peace, not through conquest, but through the choice to be protectors. Meanwhile, Hyunwoo, Kim met with Cluster Prime 7 in a chamber filled with data processing equipment that hummed with electronic efficiency. The Kretch Collective manifested through dozens of coordinated drones, their chittering communication creating complex harmonies of shared thought. Human negotiation methods defy mathematical optimization, the Cluster Prime stated through its speaker drones. Your success rates exceed theoretical maximums for logical persuasion techniques. Hyunwoo adjusted his glasses and smiled. That is because we do not rely only on logic. We use a combination of mathematical analysis, psychological understanding, and intuitive leaps that computers cannot calculate. He showed the collective charts comparing different problem-solving methods. Pure logic works perfectly for problems with complete information and stable parameters. But most real-world problems have incomplete data and changing conditions. The Kretch drones processed this information with mechanical precision. Clarify intuitive leaps. This term lacks mathematical definition. Intuition is pattern recognition. That happens too fast for conscious analysis, Hyunwoo explained. Humans can see solutions before we can prove they are correct. We call it educated guessing or gut feelings. He showed them examples of human innovations that had come from intuitive breakthroughs followed by logical verification. The collective intelligence of the Kretch is incredibly powerful for analyzing known patterns. But what about discovering completely new patterns? The collective calculated rapidly. New pattern discovery requires random variation testing. This is inefficient, unless you incorporate individual perspectives that think differently from the collective, Hyunwoo suggested. Humans solve complex problems by having many individuals think about them independently, then sharing their different insights. He demonstrated with a puzzle that had multiple solutions. Each person approaches the problem from a different angle. The collective intelligence comes from combining their different perspectives, not from forcing them to think identically. The Kretch found this concept mathematically interesting. You suggest that inefficient individual thinking creates efficient collective solutions through diversity calculation. The Villani and Thakari think about problems in ways that Kretch intelligence cannot replicate, Hyunwoo continued. Their perspectives could enhance collective problem-solving capability rather than threatening collective efficiency. The implications were staggering to the collective mind. Integration of foreign thought patterns could optimize overall galactic intelligence networks. Across the station, Minji Lee sat with Zeth Moore in a chamber filled with the soft sounds and gentle scents that helped Villani telepathy function. The ancient telepath's dark-patterned skin showed deep concentration as he tried to understand human communication methods. Your minds are chaos, Zeth Moore said, touching his temple where telepathic organs concentrated. When I attempt to read human thoughts, I find contradictions, multiple simultaneous ideas, and emotional noise that interferes with logical analysis." Minji laughed, a sound that somehow made the telepath feel more at ease. "That is because you are trying to read our minds the way you read Villani minds. Human consciousness works differently." She showed him brain scan images comparing human and Villani neural activity. "Your telepathy evolved from group survival needs. You share thoughts to coordinate group actions. Human consciousness evolved from individual survival needs. We think multiple thoughts simultaneously to consider different possibilities." Zethmore studied the brain scans with growing fascination. "Your neural patterns suggest constant internal conflict resolution. We call it thinking things through," Minji explained. "Every human mind contains multiple perspectives that argue with each other until they reach conclusions. We are like a committee of voices inside one head." She demonstrated by thinking out loud about a simple problem, letting Zethmore observe her mental process through his telepathic abilities. He watched in amazement as different parts of her mind considered various options, evaluated consequences, and gradually built consensus. "This is why human minds seem chaotic to telepaths," Minji continued. "You are seeing our internal debate process, not our final decisions." Zethmore realized the implications. If Villani telepathy could learn to read individual consciousness rather than only shared consciousness, we could understand non-telepathic species more effectively. The Kretch and Thakari have forms of intelligence that telepathy cannot access, Minji agreed. But if you could learn to appreciate individual thinking patterns, you could communicate with them in ways that respect their mental privacy while still achieving understanding. Finally, Taiho Choi met with security representatives from all three species in a chamber designed for tactical analysis. Military leaders who had spent months preparing for war found themselves discussing something entirely different. "Each of your species has military capabilities that the others fear," Taiho began, showing comparative strength analyses. "But fear is based on the assumption that military power will be used aggressively." He demonstrated defensive uses for offensive capabilities. Villani telepathic coordination could create the most effective peacekeeping force in galactic history. Perfect communication eliminates friendly fire incidents and civilian casualties. The Villani representatives had never considered their military abilities as peacekeeping tools. Kretch collective intelligence could optimize resource distribution to prevent conflicts before they start, Taiho continued. Perfect efficiency in logistics and supply chains eliminates most causes of territorial disputes. The Kretch calculated the mathematical elegance of prevention versus reaction strategies. Thakari warrior traditions could provide the honor framework for galactic security. The emergency klaxons shattered the quiet atmosphere of Omega-7 with piercing wails that echoed through every corridor. In the main communication center, Chancellor Vorthak's 6 arms moved frantically across control panels as incoming data streams painted a picture of cosmic horror. Long-range sensors at the galaxy's edge had detected something that made previous conflicts seem trivial. The Devourers had arrived. The name itself carried terror throughout galactic civilization. Ancient records spoke of an extragalactic force that consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space and cosmic dust. Most species considered them legend, stories told to frighten children or explain mysterious disappearances of remote colonies, but the sensor data was unmistakable. Massive structures, each larger than a moon, moved through space at impossible speeds. They approached the galaxy's outer rim like a plague of mechanical locusts, consuming everything in their path. Energy readings suggested technology beyond anything in the galactic database. In the negotiation chambers, the three-way war preparations suddenly seemed absurdly insignificant. Ji-Won Park stood in the center of the main chamber as holographic. Displays showed the approaching threat. Representatives from all three species stared at the images with growing horror. The Devourers moved in perfect formation, their dark hulks blotting out entire star fields. How long until they reach inhabited? Systems? Asked Zethmore, his telepathic abilities picking up waves of fear from minds throughout the station. 18 months, reported a Kretch analysis drone, its chittering voice flat with mechanical precision. Current trajectory indicates first contact with Outer Rim colonies in 14 months. Core systems vulnerable within 2 years. Honor Guard Zoltan studied the tactical displays with a warrior's eye. What do we know about their capabilities? Chancellor Vorthak transmitted the complete sensor data to all delegations. The images showed Devourer ships tearing apart asteroids, planets, and even small moons with weapons that seemed to unmake matter itself. Nothing remained after their passage except empty space. Previous encounters occurred 8,000 years ago, the Chancellor explained. Historical records are incomplete, but they indicate the Devourers consumed 17 star systems before disappearing beyond the galactic rim. What stopped them before? Asked Cluster Prime 7. Unknown. Records suggest they departed voluntarily, after achieving some unspecified objective. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The three species had been preparing to destroy each other while a greater threat approached that could destroy them all. Traditional military. Thinking would suggest immediate alliance formation, combined fleet operations, and coordinated defense strategies. The alien species began calculating force deployments, resource allocations, and tactical coordination protocols. But Ji-Won Park had a different idea. This changes everything, she announced. Not just the military situation, but the entire purpose of these negotiations. Hyunwoo Kim activated displays showing comparative analyses of the three species' capabilities. Fighting the Devourers will require the best that each of your civilizations can offer. But more importantly, it will require you to become better than you have ever been before. The alien delegations expected discussions of fleet formations and weapons systems. Instead, the humans began talking about something far more ambitious. The Volani telepathic network could coordinate defensive operations across hundreds of star systems simultaneously, Minji Lee explained. But only if you can learn to include non-telepathic minds in your network. She showed theoretical models of expanded telepathic communication. Imagine if Volani telepaths could serve as translators between Kretch collective intelligence and Thakari individual commanders. Perfect understanding without mental invasion. Zethmore's eyes widened as he grasped the implications. Telepathic coordination enhanced by individual and collective perspectives. The network would be stronger, not weaker. Kretch Industrial. Capacity could build defensive installations on a galactic scale, Taiho Choi continued, but only if you can optimize for multiple species' needs simultaneously rather than just collective efficiency. He demonstrated supply chain models that incorporated Volani agricultural requirements and Thakari strategic positions. Maximum efficiency achieved through diversity of input rather than uniformity of process. The Kretch drones calculated rapidly. Optimized multi-species resource allocation could increase defensive capability by 400% over single-species systems. Thakari military traditions could provide the honor framework that holds the alliance together under extreme pressure, Ji-Won concluded, but only if you can find honor in protection rather than conquest. She showed examples of human military history where the greatest warriors had been defenders rather than conquerors. leading through example, protecting the weak, maintaining discipline under impossible conditions. These are the honors that create legends. Honor Guard Zalthan straightened in his armor. You speak of honor that grows through service rather than diminishing through sacrifice. The humans had done something extraordinary. Instead of asking the three species to set aside their differences to fight a common enemy, they had shown how their differences could become strengths in the face of extinction. But the real breakthrough came when Hyunwoo presented the complete strategic analysis. The Devourers are not just a military threat, he explained. They are a test. They appear every few thousand years to challenge galactic civilization. Species that can unify and evolve, survive. Species that cannot are consumed. He showed historical patterns of devourer appearances throughout cosmic history. They do not want to destroy everything. They want to eliminate civilizations that have reached evolutionary dead ends. They are cosmic gardeners, pruning failed growth to make room for new possibilities. The implications were staggering. The current crisis was not just about surviving an invasion. It was about proving that galactic civilization deserved to survive. Traditional alliance strategies will fail, Minji added. Military cooperation without cultural evolution will collapse under pressure. The Devourers have seen every form of desperate alliance. They know how to break them. She showed communication intercepts from previous Devourer encounters. They study their targets for months before attacking. They identify weakness points in alliances and exploit them with surgical precision. But they have never encountered something like this, Taiho concluded. Three species that become stronger by working together rather than weaker. Cooperation that enhances individual nature rather than suppressing it. The alien delegations realized they were being offered something unprecedented. Not just survival, but transformation into something greater than any of them could become alone. Zethmore spoke first. The Vellani Empire accepts this challenge. Our telepathic abilities will serve the Alliance, enhanced by understanding of individual consciousness. Cluster Prime 7's drones chittered in rapid calculation before responding. The Kretsch Collective confirms participation. Our efficiency will be optimized through integration of diverse perspectives. Honor Guard Zalthan stood in full ceremonial attention. The Thakari Republic pledges its honor to this alliance. Our warriors will find glory in protection rather than conquest. But Jiwon Park raised a hand for silence. This is not an alliance in the traditional sense. Alliances can be broken when conditions change. What you are creating is something new, an evolution of consciousness that makes cooperation not just beneficial, but inevitable. She activated a final display showing the theoretical structure of their new civilization. The Vellani will learn to appreciate individual thinking. The Kretsch will learn to value diverse perspectives. The Thakari will learn to find honor in service. You will not just work together. You will become examples of what galactic civilization can achieve. The chamber buzzed with excited conversation in 3 different languages as the delegations discussed the implications. They were not just planning to survive the Devourers, they were planning to become the kind of civilization that could transcend the test entirely. Outside the station, 3 massive fleets that had been prepared for war began receiving new orders. Instead of battle formations, they would create the foundation for the most ambitious cooperative project in galactic history. The transformation had begun, and the aliens were starting to understand why they had been afraid of human negotiators. Humans did not just end conflicts, they made new forms of civilization possible. 3 months into the greatest construction project in galactic history, something unprecedented was happening in deep space. The combined fleets of 3 former enemies worked together with an efficiency that defied every prediction and terrified every observer. In the Kepler defense sector, massive Kretsch industrial platforms assembled defensive installations, while Volani agricultural ships provided life support for mixed-species crews. Thakari honor guards maintained security and discipline across operations that spanned dozens of star systems. What should have been chaos was instead a symphony of cooperation. But the true transformation was not in the construction schedules or tactical deployments. It was in the minds of the species themselves. Zethmore stood on the bridge of the Volani, flagship harmony of minds. But his telepathic network now included something that would have been impossible just months before. Through carefully designed interface technology, he could sense the thoughts of non-telepathic beings without invading their mental privacy. The Kretsch engineering teams report construction ahead of schedule, he announced to the mixed species command crew. But they also report something else. They are enjoying the work. The concept of enjoyment was foreign to traditional Kretsch thinking. The collective mind optimized for efficiency, not emotional satisfaction, but working with Volani telepaths and Thakari warriors had introduced new variables into their calculations. How is this possible? Asked Commander Sunwoo, the human liaison assigned to the flagship. Zethmore touched his telepathic organs, still amazed by what he could sense. The Kretsch drones are experiencing individual satisfaction for the first time. When they solve problems in cooperation with other species, each drone feels a sense of personal accomplishment that enhances collective performance. Through the telepathic link, he could perceive Kretsch workers who had learned to take pride in their individual contributions while maintaining perfect collective coordination. It was mathematical optimization, enhanced by emotional investment. They are becoming more than they were, Zethmore continued, more efficient as a collective because they are more satisfied as individuals. Meanwhile, in the asteroid mining complex, 7, Cluster Prime 7, experienced something that challenged every assumption about hive mind consciousness. The collective intelligence had always operated on pure logic and mathematical optimization. Emotions were inefficient. Individual preferences were mathematical errors, but working with Volani telepaths and Thakari warriors had revealed that emotions and individual perspectives could actually improve collective decision-making. Analysis update. The Cluster Prime announced to its diverse team. Integration of emotional data from non-Kretsch sources has increased problem-solving efficiency by 37%. The Volani telepath on the team, Yuna, smiled as she shared the emotional resonance of successful cooperation through the mental link. Happiness is not inefficiency. It is positive feedback that indicates optimal outcomes. The Thakari engineer, Ki-hyun, adjusted the mining equipment with practiced skill. Individual pride in excellent work motivates greater effort than duty alone. The Cluster Prime processed this information with growing understanding. The collective becomes stronger when individuals within it are stronger. Optimization includes emotional and cultural variables, not just mathematical ones. For the first time in Kretsch history, the collective mind began to value individual contributions not just for their functional utility, but for their unique perspectives. Drones who had been interchangeable parts were becoming irreplaceable specialists. On the fortress world of Thakari Prime, Honor Guard Zalthan addressed the assembled warrior council in the Hall of Ancient Victories. The banners of 1,000 honored battles hung from the walls, each one representing conquest through strength and courage. But today, Zoltan spoke of a different kind of honor. "Warriors of Thakari," he began, his voice carrying the authority of countless victories. "Today, we face a test greater than any in our history. Not a test of our strength against enemies, but a test of our wisdom in choosing when to fight and when to protect." The assembled warriors listened with the discipline that had made them legends throughout the galaxy. Many bore scars from honorable combat. All had proven their courage in battle. The human G1 Park has shown us that the greatest warriors are those who can choose not to fight, Zoltan continued. Not from weakness, but from strength so great that violence becomes unnecessary. He activated displays showing the defensive construction projects. Our forces now protect Vellani agricultural worlds and Kretch industrial centers. We guard the weak not because we must, but because we choose to. This is honor that grows rather than diminishes. Warrior Captain Ji-hoon stepped forward. "Honor Guard, how do we measure victory when we do not defeat enemies?" Zoltan smiled beneath his battle helmet. "By what we preserve rather than what we destroy. By what we build rather than what we conquer. By what we become rather than what we defeat." The concept was revolutionary for a warrior culture built on honorable combat. But as the assembled warriors considered the implications, they began to understand a deeper truth. Protecting others required greater strength than conquering them. Leading through example demanded more courage than leading through force. The honor of service was more difficult to achieve than the honor of victory. "We are not becoming weaker," Zoltan concluded. "We are becoming stronger in ways our ancestors never imagined." But as the three species transformed through cooperation, observers throughout the galaxy watched with growing alarm. Representatives from dozens of other civilizations gathered on neutral space stations to discuss what they called the human phenomenon. Ambassador Quix of the Altarian Republic addressed the emergency session of the Minor Species Council. "The Vellani, Kretch, and Thakari are not acting like alliance partners. They are acting like something new." The assembled delegates shifted uncomfortably. Alliance politics they understood. Species cooperated when it served their interests and competed when it did not. But what they were observing defied all precedent. "The Vellani are sharing their telepathic abilities with non-telepaths," reported Observer Nexus of the Quantum Collective. "This should weaken their advantages. Instead, their telepathic network has become more powerful. The Kretch are allowing individual initiative within their collective," added Councillor Vex of the Democratic Union. "This should fragment their efficiency. Instead, their productivity has increased exponentially. The Thakari are serving others rather than conquering them," concluded Representative Zara of the Free Traders. "This should diminish their military reputation. Instead, other warrior species are requesting Thakari protection." The implications were terrifying to species that had built their civilizations on competition and conflict. If cooperation could make enemies stronger rather than weaker, what did that mean for traditional power structures? The humans have not conquered these species, Ambassador Quix observed. They have transformed them into something that no longer needs to be conquered. On the flagship Soul's Promise, the human team monitored communications from across the galaxy. They were not surprised by the fear and confusion their success had generated. "They think we have discovered some secret technique for controlling other species," Hyunwoo said, reviewing the intercepted diplomatic messages. Minji laughed while translating particularly panicked reports from minor species governments. They cannot understand that we are not making anyone do anything. We are helping them discover what they already wanted to do. Taiho studied tactical reports from the defense construction. The Alliance is ahead of schedule and under budget. Military efficiency has improved by factors that seem impossible, but the most important change is not in their capabilities. Jiwan nodded, looking out at the stars where 3 former enemies now worked as partners. The most important change is in their understanding of themselves. She activated displays showing psychological profiles of the 3 species. The Villani always wanted to connect with other minds. We helped them learn how to do it without telepathic invasion. The Kretch always wanted optimal efficiency. We showed them that diversity improves optimization. The Thakari always wanted honor. We demonstrated that protection brings greater honor than conquest. They are not different species anymore, Hyunwoo observed. They are becoming something new, something that combines the best aspects of individual consciousness, collective intelligence, and warrior discipline. The transformation was accelerating beyond even human expectations, but the greatest test was still approaching from the edge of the galaxy. The Devourers had been monitoring galactic communications, studying their targets with the patience of cosmic predators. They had seen every form of alliance, every type of cooperation, every method of unification that desperate species had attempted in the face of extinction. But they had never seen anything like this. Species that became stronger through cooperation, rather than weaker. Individuals who enhanced collective intelligence instead of fragmenting it. Warriors who found honor in service rather than conquest. For the first time in cosmic ages, the Devourers faced something that challenged their fundamental assumptions about evolutionary progress. The test was about to begin. The Devourer fleet emerged from the cosmic void like a nightmare made manifest. Hundreds of ships, each larger than a moon, moved in perfect formation toward the galaxy's outer rim. Their dark hulls absorbed light and hope equally, leaving empty space in their wake. On the bridge of the combined fleet flagship Unity, representatives from 3 species and 1 human team watched the enemy approach. 6 months of unprecedented cooperation had created the most powerful defensive force in galactic history. But as the Devourers drew closer, everyone understood they faced something beyond conventional warfare. "Contact in 17 hours," reported Ensign Minho from the Thakari Tactical Station. "Enemy formation maintains perfect spacing and coordination. No energy signatures consistent with known weapon systems." Zethmore closed his eyes and extended his telepathic senses through the expanded network that now connected minds across dozens of star systems. The Villani agricultural worlds report successful evacuation of all civilian populations. Our people are safe, but our hearts remain with our worlds. Cluster Prime 7's drones chittered in rapid calculation. Industrial platform relocation 97% complete. Critical infrastructure preserved. Defensive installations at optimal readiness. Honor Guard Zalthan stood in full ceremonial armor, but his weapons remained secured. Thakari defense. Fleets report ready for engagement. All warriors understand their duty is protection, not conquest. As the moments passed, something became clear that shocked observers throughout the galaxy. The 3-species alliance was not falling apart under pressure. Instead, it was becoming stronger. Traditional alliance theory predicted that extreme stress would force each species to prioritize their own survival over cooperative goals. Military history showed that desperate situations caused allies to abandon each other when retreat became necessary. But the expanded consciousness that had emerged from human mediation operated by different rules. Incoming transmission, announced Communications Officer Su Yung. Source unknown. Signal pattern unlike any in our databases. The main display activated, revealing something that made everyone on the bridge step back in shock. The transmission showed not a message, but a perfect replica of their own bridge, populated by identical copies of themselves. The Devourer duplicate of Jiwon Park spoke with her exact voice and mannerisms. Greetings, representatives of galactic civilization. We are the Devourers, though that term does not accurately describe our function. The original Jiwon felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. You have been studying us. For 8 months, 17 days, 4 hours, the duplicate confirmed. We have analyzed your biological structures, psychological patterns, technological capabilities, and social organizations with complete precision. The duplicate Zethmore touched his temple exactly as the original did when concentrating. Your species have achieved something unprecedented. You have created cooperative evolution rather than competitive stagnation. This presents a problem, continued the duplicate Cluster Prime 7. Our function is to eliminate civilizations that have reached evolutionary dead ends, but you have demonstrated continued growth rather than terminal stasis. The duplicate honor guard, Xalthan, stood with military bearing that perfectly matched the original. However, our analysis indicates that your transformation is incomplete. You have learned to cooperate, but you have not yet learned to transcend the need for external threats to maintain that cooperation. The implications crashed over the bridge like a cold wave. The Devourers were not just testing their military capabilities. They were testing whether the new form of consciousness could survive without enemies to unite against. You are offering us a choice, Jiwon realized. Correct, the duplicate confirmed. Option 1. We engage in conventional warfare. Your defensive capabilities are impressive, but ultimately insufficient. We will consume your civilization and move to the next galaxy. Option 2. We withdraw without conflict. But in 50 years, when the memory of external threat has faded, your cooperation will collapse into traditional competition. We will return to complete the cleansing then. Option 3. The duplicate paused for effect. You demonstrate that your evolution is permanent by maintaining cooperation without external pressure. If you can sustain your unity for 100 years of peace, we will acknowledge your civilization as successfully evolved. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this cosmic ultimatum. The Devourers were not conquerors. They were gardeners, pruning civilizations that could not grow beyond conflict. But Hyunwoo Kim stepped forward with growing excitement. You have misunderstood something fundamental about our transformation. The duplicate Hyunwoo raised an eyebrow with perfect mimicry. Explain. You assume that cooperation requires external threats or artificial maintenance, the original continued. But what we have created is not cooperation. It is evolution of consciousness itself. He activated displays showing the psychological changes in all 3 species. The Villani have not learned to cooperate with non-telepaths. They have learned that individual consciousness enhances telepathic ability. The Kretch have not learned to value individual perspectives. They have learned that diversity optimizes collective intelligence. The Thakari have not learned to avoid conquest. They have learned that protection brings greater honor than victory. Minji Lee joined the explanation. Each species has become more themselves, not less themselves, through cooperation. This change cannot be reversed because it makes them stronger rather than weaker. Furthermore, added Taiho Choi. The cooperation is not based on shared enemies or common threats. It is based on shared growth and mutual enhancement. The duplicate human team exchanged glances that perfectly mirrored their original's growing confidence. Jiwon stepped to the center of the bridge. We accept option 3, but with a modification. We do not need 100 years to prove our evolution is permanent. We need 100 days. The duplicates showed the first expression that did not match their originals. Surprise. Impossible, the duplicate Zethmore stated. Civilizational change requires generational timescales to become permanent, not when the change enhances rather than suppresses natural tendencies. Zethmore replied, Our telepathic abilities are stronger now. We cannot go back to weaker telepathy even if we wanted to. Mathematical impossibility, declared the duplicate. Cluster Prime 7. Regression to previous optimization patterns would reduce efficiency. The collective cannot choose inferior performance. Our honor has grown through service. Honor Guard Zalthan added. Warriors who have tasted the honor of protection cannot find satisfaction in mere conquest. We have become better warriors, not different warriors. The Devourer duplicates conferred among themselves in a conversation that perfectly mirrored the originals, but reached different conclusions. Your proposal lacks sufficient testing parameters, the duplicate Jiwon finally responded. Then observe, the original Jiwon challenged. Withdraw your fleet to the Galactic Rim and watch. See if 3 species that have learned to enhance each other through cooperation can maintain that cooperation when the external threat disappears. The standoff lasted exactly 17 minutes and 34 seconds. Then, without warning, the Devourer fleet began to withdraw. Your test begins now, the duplicate Jiwon announced. 100 days of peace. If your cooperation survives without external pressure, we will acknowledge successful evolution. If it fails, we will return to complete our function. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Through the viewports, they could see the massive Devourer ships retreating toward the edge of the galaxy, their dark forms disappearing into the cosmic void. Well, said Hyunwoo, adjusting his glasses with a nervous laugh. That went better than expected, but the real test was just beginning. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The existential threat had vanished, but the alliance remained. For the first time in galactic history, 3 major powers continued cooperating after the crisis that had brought them together was over. On Vellani agricultural worlds, telepathic farmers discovered they could produce more food than ever before. By incorporating Kretsch efficiency algorithms and Thakari quality standards, the enhanced telepathic network that included non-telepathic perspectives had become essential to their operations. On Kretsch industrial platforms, collective intelligence optimized by individual creativity continued to break productivity records. Drones who had learned individual satisfaction could not return to simple mechanical function without feeling incomplete. On Thakari Fortress worlds, warriors who had found honor in protection established academies to teach other species their codes of service. The honor of guardianship had become more appealing than the honor of conquest. 20 days into the test, something remarkable happened. Other species began requesting membership in what galactic media had started calling the Unity. 50 days into the test, minor species conflicts throughout the galaxy began ending through human mediation. The human team had become the most requested diplomats in galactic history. 70 days into the test, the Galactic Council formally acknowledged that a new form of civilization had emerged. Traditional alliance politics, based on temporary cooperation for mutual benefit, had been replaced by permanent,